morning, everybody. It's Laurie White, President of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to episode number 98 of Chamber TV. And we are recording this on Wednesday morning at 9:07. And we've had a lot of news that's transpired overnight, and we have guests to discuss with us what's happening in Congress with federal stimulus relief measures and some last-minute jockeying by President Trump to add additional provisions to the bill unexpectedly. So our guests today are Senator Jack Reed and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. It's a pleasure to see you as always. Hello, good morning, how are you? How are your families? Senator Reed, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and to everyone. Despite the pandemic, we hope for happy holidays and a time with family and friends to reconnect and to recharge for the coming year. It took 8 or 9 months for the Senate to move on a House bill that passed last May. That their legislation was an outline of what we've done in this latest legislation. Much too long a delay. And finally, we get to the point where, with bipartisan action by members, not the leadership, Senate, but members, we've got it moving. And now to hear the president say he's threatening to veto it is reckless and irresponsible, particularly since his Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary Mnuchin, was involved in every detail of this. In fact, Secretary Mnuchin put out a press release applauding the passage and promising that checks would be out next week. So it just seems there's no one in charge in the administration, and that is very disturbing. What we have in the bill, which we hope survives many of the aspects, $284 billion for Paycheck Protection Program, and it would allow a second PPP loan. We have $20 billion for economic injury disaster loans, which are very, very effective through SBA, particularly when the local SBA is involved and there's full and adequate disclosure. It expands eligibility for the PPP loans to 501c6s, including chambers of commerce, but it also establishes a $15 billion grant program for live venues. I know our entertainment and creative community has been really struggling. This should help. There is an additional, of course, extension of unemployment, pandemic unemployment insurance coverage with a $300 a week plus up. So there will also be a direct payment of $600 for an adult and in a family, and also for children in the family. That is one of the bones of contention. But Senate and House Democrats have been in favor of a robust payment for many, many months now. So I think the bill has to be signed immediately so we can keep these benefits going and restore confidence to the markets. So let me stop right there and thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Reed, for that perspective. Senator Whitehouse, good morning. I hope you're well. I hope your family's well. And I'll ask you the same question. What the heck happened overnight?
Something happened in the fever dream that is the Oval Office of the United States. As Jack said, the administration was involved in every bit of this. The president clearly has no idea what's actually in the and is objecting to things that he's supported before in similar bills. In fact, he appears not to have known that the COVID bill and the omnibus bill were separate bills and were only put together for the sake of a single vote in the Senate for parliamentary purposes. So it's a little hard to know how to deal with that because it's not rational behavior. So the people like Pat Leahy are at work trying to figure out what the White House really wants, to figure out if there's a way to adjust it. Obviously, if we can increase the cash payment, we'd be happy to do that, but we don't want to do it at the expense of robbing other programs that we fought very, very hard to get in. Jack gave a very good summary of the bill. The only things I would add is that there's a significant increase in SNAP, food assistance, and in childcare assistance as well. So a lot of families that have been depending on food assistance and need support if they're going to work with childcare will find that they were helped as well. We wish we could have done more. We wish we could have done sooner, but I don't think Mitch McConnell took this seriously until it started to impact his Georgia races. And then suddenly he was interested in getting something done.
So let's pick up the conversation with the question of what happens now. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she's ready to put it on the floor on Thursday to see what happens. What is going to transpire in the Senate? Senator Reid, we'll start with you.
HUD? Well, it's very unclear what is happening because the House could put it up on a unanimous consent on Thursday. We are in pro forma sessions, assuming that the president would sign the bill, and there are procedural hurdles to get back and to vote. We don't have the proxy rules that the House has where people can vote from afar. We have to be in person on the floor voting. So it could be chaotic. And the other issue too is it really depends on when the president intends to veto this bill. I know Nancy's trying to preempt that, and I would support that and do what I had to do to make it happen. But if it can't be done, then he has 10 days, not counting Sunday, to veto the bill. So he could be just holding this out. So again, I think the House has reacted very quickly and very appropriately. The Senate, procedurally, it would be much more difficult for us to reassemble, but I think we'd have to.
Yeah, unless we could get unanimous consent, which with people like Rand Paul in the chamber seems a little bit unlikely. Not impossible, but unlikely.
Yeah, I would also say, there are some of our Senate colleagues who are supporting the president in this view. I think Senator Cruz, has been critical of the bill and along the lines of the president. So again, trying to get unanimous consent could be very, very difficult for us. But that would mean we'd really have to go through some legislative gymnastics to get back there. But it's so important. I would press the leadership to do it.
So the question is, folks are watching this morning, Wednesday, December 3rd, 23rd, and they're wondering, they're saying, okay, well, we appear to be on the precipice of getting some relief, some tangible relief with checks in the mail potentially next week. So I guess, the very simple question is, what do you predict is going to happen, and when will people actually get those checks?
Sheldon, do you want to go, or?
It's hard to tell at this point. It depends on how recalcitrant the president is, whether we pass another measure and he vetoes that, whether he can be brought to it. There are too many unknowns. I would say I'd be very surprised if it was more than 10 days until this was over and settled one way or the other. But 10 days right now is a lot for a lot of families. We'd like to get this done. We'd like to get the money out. A lot of negotiation and compromise went into this. And the surprise attack and formed veto from the president is something that I think we'd like to get over as quickly as we can. But it's hard to judge it because there's no sense behind it.
Yeah, I think Sheldon's comments are exactly on target. It's that we're dealing with someone who is completely, at this point, disregarding his own administration's extensive negotiations. It would be one thing if he stood up and said, 3 or 4 days ago, I demand $2,000 per person as a stimulus check, and unless I'll sign it. He said nothing. So the only assumption, particularly with Mnuchin, doing all the legwork for him and talking and approving things, that this was a done deal, so to speak. There are several possibilities. As we've mentioned before, there could be a UC in the House, and we could try for a UC in the Senate. The House leadership and Senator McConnell could commit to passing the legislation as soon as we return. If he would sign this bill, just to increment the payment, that's one possibility. Or the president could be, someone should sit him down and tell him about the seriousness, just the uncertainty of this, and also the real impact. Unemployment benefits run out the 26th. The eviction ban runs out the end of this month. The suffering would be significant, and for the business community, the uncertainty would, particularly over the holidays, would be just unacceptable, and that's being mild about it. The president is not acting responsibly in the interest of the country.
The sticking points around the individual and couples stimulus checks are the centerpiece of his alleged objection. Are there other pieces in play?
Well, he's made some, just wild statements about, money that's going overseas. What he doesn't either understand or want to understand is the fact that there are two separate bills here. There's the COVID emergency bill, as Sheldon pointed out, which addresses the things like PPP, the EDIL programs, the live venue programs, those COVID-related, really one-off programs just for this pandemic. And then there's the annual appropriations bill, which includes funding the entire government, including the State Department, including programs like that. Now he's launching into this attack, indicating that we put all this thing in the COVID bill, and no. What we did really was, in order to get this thing done in a timely way, is taking two bills, combine them, and pass them. And, again, all of this was done with complete knowledge of the White House, complete knowledge of Secretary Mnuchin. This is not a surprise. This is not an attempt to do things we couldn't do otherwise. But he's, again, there's no rhyme, reason, or rationality to what he's doing.
And as Jack has had really firsthand experience with the problem of ill-founded vetoes, because Jack, and as the ranking member on the Armed Services Committee, has been working very, very carefully with his House counterparts and with our Republican chairman, Jim Inhofe, to get the National Defense Bill through. And we have agreement on it, and it's passed. And the president is also threatening to veto that bill. And pretty much every time he threatens to veto it, he has a new and different reason for vetoing it. So it's very hard to track his thinking through these veto threats, because there's a new one virtually every time he brings it up. And the last one is not talked about any longer. Now there's something different that bothers him. Mm-hmm. So we're also waiting for the veto on that to play out, and that may bring us back before the new year.
Well, it seems like escalating degrees of frustration on his part as additional members of his cabinet seemingly begin to peel off, including Attorney General Barr. Thoughts, Senator Reid, on what's happening on that front?
Well, I mean, he is trying to insinuate all of his hardcore people in the government wherever he can. Some of them are, sort of more honorific officers, like the Kennedy Center board. He's put two of his closest allies there. But I think what happened is that when Attorney General Barr said that there was no significant fraud in the election, and he's responsible as the chief law enforcement officer of the United States to make that judgment, Trump was going to fire him. He decided, well, I'm, rather than being fired, I'll go. But there are some people, and I would say belatedly, beginning to stand up, but they're either fired or they're marginalized. And in fact, there's really no one in charge. I think, we're in the midst of the most significant pandemic we've ever had, at least in 100 years, since the influenza of 1918. And the president has said virtually nothing about the COVID. He hasn't taken the lead. The vice president is the one who got the shot to demonstrate to the public it was safe. We have just been hacked by Russia. He denies Russian involvement, basically, even though Pompeo, the Secretary of State, says, yes, it was the Russians, likely. And the significance of this is when we figured it all out, this could be the most significant espionage intrusion in the history of the world, perhaps. We don't know yet how much data and where they are and where they still are. And yet the president's indifferent to that. Instead, he's turning around and saying, after we've come together on a bipartisan basis, overwhelming vote. And Sheldon is right, not only on these bills, but he's going to threaten the national defense bill, paying soldiers and sailors, Marines and airmen, making all those things possible, their families, and taking care of them, and also making sure they have the resources to protect us. And for no reason at all. So this is a presidency that's just spinning out of control with every moment.
Do you think the Russian hacking, Senator Reid, was a surprise to the president?
I'm sorry, you'd have to repeat that, Laurie. I've got hearing aid. I'm an old paratrooper injury.
So in other words, you don't want to answer that.
No, I didn't hear it.
Okay. Do you think the Russian hacking incident came as a surprise to the president?
I think it came as a surprise to everyone, frankly. I've had communications with General Nakasone, who's the head of Cybercom. And what's really disturbing is this was not discovered by the government. This was discovered by a security service, FireEye, I believe, when they noticed an unusual occurrence on their system, and they looked, and then they looked further, and they discovered, and they sent up the hue and cry. So this happened. In fact, the Russians have been on our system since last March. This once again shows that the big issues that the president tends to ignore, and cybersecurity. He fired the head of the cybersecurity, Chris Krebs, a few weeks ago, because Krebs also stood up and said the election was legitimate, and in fact, it was the most secure election we've ever had. So that agency has been that's been downrated, and that's the coordinating body for all of our internal cybersecurity in the United States. So that it is a very serious issue. But again, which makes it worse is that they were undetected from March till today, literally.
So FireEye itself was hacked, and then subsequently,
FireEye was hacked. There was a Texas contractor who was the initial source of intrusion. So SolarWinds, I believe, is the name of that company, and they are services to many government and many Fortune 500 companies all across. But Firefly was the one that saw the discrepancy and then began looking and then discovered it and then put the alert out. And at that point, the government started reacting. But the point I think we want to stress is they didn't find it, but once they found it, the president is now literally denying the facts that the Russians did it. It is a major effort, a grave intrusion as described, and we have to take coordinated steps. And one of the ironies about vetoing the national defense bill, we have put in 20 different items. In fact, Congressman Lanchman was very active in doing this. 20 different items that are directed at cybersecurity, including coordinating our response, giving the Homeland Security Department the ability to go in and review and audit and check systems in different agencies. And he's going to veto that at the time where it's like, if we were under attack by aircraft saying, I'm going to get rid of all the missiles, or I don't want to buy more. It's just preposterous.
Just a quick word on Jim Langevin. Much of the cybersecurity program that was passed in the NDAA that is now subject to the president's veto came out of a bipartisan, bicameral leadership effort to define what needs to be done on cyber. And Jim Langevin was the House Democrat lead on that, along with Jackson, my colleague, Angus King on our side. And so, extra kudos to Jim while we're all together on this one, because he did a lot of preparatory work that teed this stuff up for Jack to get it into the NDAA.
So yes, we will pause and we will recognize Congressman Langevin for his intrepid work, not just on this measure, but on lots of issues. Senator Whitehouse, going back to the Russian hacking, I will ask you the same question I asked Senator Reid. Given President Trump's alliances, if you will, with Putin, do you think that this hacking was a surprise to him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it surprised everybody. In fact, not only is it a surprise, it's a real embarrassment when you consider the money that we've spent and the resources that we've put into developing our U.S. government cyber defenses. For the Russians to get in, for them to get in undetected, for them to get in undetected for a period of 6 months and be able to do further advancement into our systems through the hole that they found. We don't know how bad this hack has been yet. We still haven't figured it out. So as Ricky Ricardo used to say, somebody's got some splaining to do about this. And it's really important that the Biden administration be in here as soon as possible to take a serious look at what went wrong, because you clearly cannot trust the Trump administration to do this. And you certainly can't trust the president, who's denying right now what his attorney general and military are saying, which is this was a major Russian hack, perhaps the most significant espionage hack in history.
Wow, two historic events all playing out within the same year. Never seen issues, and it just is incredibly sobering and just mind-blowing to consider where we are as a country.
And with an American White House that doesn't seem able to respond in a logical or sensible way.
So let's segue to the incoming Biden administration, and I will start with you, Senator Reid. Have you spoken with the president-elect?
I had a brief conversation with him, very brief, on an issue, a Department of Defense issue, and that's it. I maintain a regular contact with our former colleague, Senator Ted Kaufman, who is in charge of the transition and who is close to the president.
So what are you expecting, Senator Whitehouse, in terms of initial activity out of the new Biden administration relative to COVID?
Well, I think they'll start teeing up another bill. They've said they would. They've called this a down payment. So I think they'll get to work very quickly on that. There are also a lot of signals that they're going to get to work very quickly on a significant infrastructure bill. Now that Pete Buttigieg is lined up for transportation, I suspect that he and that office will be at the center of it. The Transportation Department usually is at the center of it, but there's a lot else to be done. And I think there's some real bipartisan opportunities on a major transportation bill, particularly one with a lot of green components with it, to provide a down payment on the climate action that the president has also promised. So I would say those would be the three immediate things I'd expect: COVID, infrastructure, and beginning to explore working out a climate bill.
Mm-hmm. Do we expect a peaceful transition of power, Senator Reid?
Yes, we should demand it. Unexpected, we should demand it. The Constitution is very clear. The term of the president and the vice president expires on 20 January. And allegiance to the Constitution should compel President Trump after, particularly on January 6th, the vice president will have to accept the results of the Electoral College, should, in his duty and obligation to the Constitution and the American people, turn over very peacefully, and we hope with civility, as every other previous president that I can recall has done, to the Biden administration.
Mm-hmm. How do you imagine Inauguration Day will play out in terms of security, in terms of tone, presence? Do you expect or anticipate that the president will just depart the White House and go off to Mar-a-Lago and disappear into the night, or what scenarios are you
Well,
imagining?
I can tell you the planning that's going on now is taking into consideration, obviously, COVID. So there'll be social distancing. So there will not be the same crowded platform. My sense is that members of the Senate, because that has been the tradition for 200 years, will be on the platform, but socially distanced. As many of the House members, because they're much larger, will be on the podium. The Biden administration is discouraging people to come to the inauguration because of the COVID issue. They don't want a huge crowd, particularly if they're not socially distanced and not masked, to be there. So I suspect that it's going to be, relative to other inaugurations, subdued and because of COVID.
Mhm. Perhaps appropriately so. No parades, no galas after the swearing in.
I think the galas will be virtual. They'll have a lot of virtual events, and then they'll have very limited events where there are actual physical interaction, and those will all be with masks, et cetera. But I think a lot of it will be virtual. As to the parade, there's the problem is not so much the parade itself, because you could construct particularly military units, social distancing and all those things. It's the crowds along the side, making sure that they're protecting themselves. I have not heard yet about the parade. It might be more symbolic. It might be, a unit from the first infantry regiment of the old guard marching down, and the Marines, of course, and the Navy. We have to have all the services, but just that as a symbolic and a very short one.
Do you imagine it'll be a peaceful day? Are you hearing discussion about prepping for disturbances or anything of that nature?
Well, the security personnel prepare for every contingency, so I'm sure they'll do that. But a lot of the peacefulness will depend on, frankly, President Trump indicating that the Constitution is being carried out, that he is gracefully, we hope, leaving, and that he would discourage, along with everyone else, any type of demonstration, left or right, and that this is a day in which we should be celebrating democracy, not and our unity as a nation, not anything else.
Senator Whitehouse, are you planning to attend the inauguration?
I am.
And thoughts on how you see the day playing out?
Well, as Jack said, a lot of that depends on how much fervor Trump whips up, whether he calls his Proud Boys and other groups to come and do counter demonstrations in Washington. If he sets up a rally someplace else, perhaps in Florida, flies to the rally, does his counter effort down there, and then heads off to Mar-a-Lago, that takes some of the attention off of Washington. It's not clear what he's going to do, but the last few days are not good indicators of his state of mind.
Given your deep interest and expertise in matters pertaining to the judiciary, what are your thoughts about matters that the Judiciary Committee will be contending with in the first year of the Biden administration?
We will obviously be looking at racial justice issues. Mitch McConnell refused to allow that to be brought to the floor in any serious way, and we had one hearing thanks to Chairman Graham in the Judiciary Committee, but then stopped work, I think, at Mitch McConnell's direction. But I think President Biden is keen to get a racial justice bill done, and we've got a pretty clear outline of what it should look like. We obviously have all the new U.S. attorneys and U.S. marshals and any judicial vacancies that may open up. It could be that judges have been waiting to retire until there's a new president, in which case there'd be a little group of vacancies to fill. We have a vacancy in the First Circuit right now. So I think the early days will probably be built mostly around those two matters. And then, we'll see where we go from there. I think we've got a lot of security issues. We've got oversight of the Department of Justice. We have not been getting answers to very simple questions, not from the FBI and not from the Department of Justice. So when there's new leadership there, I think there's going to be a flood of material that we've asked for and they simply refuse to provide, that a Biden administration, I think, will provide. There was no good reason offered why we didn't get our questions answered. So we'll have all that catch-up work to do from the freeze that the Trump administration put on cooperation with congressional requests.
What about the balance of power in the Senate and the upcoming runoff in Georgia?
Well, all eyes are on Georgia, that's for sure. It's very, very close, as you know. The polling goes both ways in the same day. Democrats win, Republicans win. It's going to be, I think, heavily dependent on turnout. A lot of what we are able to do for Rhode Island hinges on what happens in Georgia. So before Thanksgiving, I went down and spent a couple of days scouting out the Georgia coast, because I think there's some coastal issues that could reverberate in this election. Sea levels rising there in Georgia as well. And one of the things I found is that the coastal organizations didn't feel that they were getting hardly any attention at all. In fact, for most of them, I was the first senator they'd met. So, I think we've got some real opportunities there to help get people turned out and realize that if they own coastal property, if they care about the state's coastal history, if they're worried about climate issues, this is a chance to really make a national difference. And we're seeing superb early turnout. And as you know, early turnout in the other states in the election in November was heavily Democratic. So we don't know this for sure, but it looks like the heavy turnout signals heavy Democratic turnout.
Where in Georgia did you go? And that was a very interesting act on your part to go down and to bring a real perspective to what's at stake here.
The whole coast, from Tybee Island up north down to St. Mary's in the south. I was bouncing around all over. A little weird to be down there in the off season. The hotel I was at felt like I was in The Shining because there was nobody there. But the groups were eager to see me, and they're now better coordinated. And we did a video to help connect and spread the message of, think coasts, because coasts matter. And if we don't start working on climate, our coasts are going to be dramatically impacted, as our Rhode Island CRMC keeps telling us. We're going to have a whole different coastline, and it's going to be the Rhode Island archipelago instead of the Rhode Island state.
Does the coastline in Georgia, based on your observations on climate change and sea change, does it look any different than perhaps Narragansett Bay looks at this moment?
Yeah, they're even more vulnerable because they have an enormous amount of mudplain and marsh, whereas we've got a lot of rocky shores. So a lot of Rhode Island's rocky shores defend fairly well against sea level rise. There are areas that do very poorly, unfortunately, like Barrington and Warwick Neck and some of our South County beaches and the Barrier Islands. But the rocky aspect of our coastline helps defend us. The Georgia coastline is essentially all sand, mud, marsh, and you go up 4 feet and you're going back for miles.
Interesting. Well, Senator Whitehouse, we only have a few minutes left, a couple of minutes, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to sum up where you believe we're headed in 2021, and to, of course, as we always do when we chat with you both on Chamber TV and also in person, leave us on an optimistic note, if you will, please.
Well, I think the change that we're going to see in the White House is going to be extraordinarily important. I think seeing something as simple as rational behavior coming out of the White House will have an enormously calming effect on people and a buoying effect on markets. I think we have real problems ahead of us, like finishing off COVID, starting to deal with climate change in a serious way, getting the economy back on its feet, rebuilding American infrastructure. And all of those things are areas where I think the new administration can make real progress and move things forward and give people a feeling of momentum and lift and progress. And I think all of that is very, very good. And I think that the tone that President-elect Biden has set, that he's going to be the president for all Americans, that we are one country, that he wants a unified message, and that we're Americans first, not Democrats and Republicans first. I think, again, it's going to be welcome. It's going to fall like rain on parched soil.
And the notion that this is action, hopefully, by the end of the year, is simply a down payment for future action with the Biden administration that's even more profound.
Yeah.
Senator Reid, as always, we want to give you the last word. And
oh, thank you. No, I think Sheldon has articulated the hopes and aspirations that we are looking forward to come January. I think one of the keys will be getting back to governance, to actually having a program and having people who are capable to carry it out. Having all the positions we hope filled, not in this administration where there's been an acting Secretary of Defense just as often as there's been a confirmed Secretary of Defense, just practically speaking. And that return to a much more normal and thoughtful approach to governance, I anticipate and hope for. I think, as Sheldon said so well, the President Biden will bring, I think, a tone of respect for the office and for the government, respect for the Constitution, and respect for the American people, all the American people, and underscore constantly and consistently that we accomplish the most when we are united, and let us unite and accomplish the grave challenges we face. We have to face them. The COVID has to be defeated. We have to restore the economy. We have to think forward in terms of climate change, as Sheldon has done so much about. We also have to think forward in terms of technology and the ability of technology to displace not just bad jobs, but good jobs. And what do we do? And the government is practically the only agency that can do that. The private sector, their charter is not to look out for the welfare of people who aren't in the organization. They have to do what's best for their organization. So we have a huge set of challenges, but we can't attack any of them unless there is a tone of thoughtful cooperation among all. And I think President Biden will bring that to the country.
Well, the theme that we have been talking about this morning is predictability, and looking forward, just as business would expect, more a series of predictable announcements, predictable behavior, and certainly ways in which that we can continue to support the American people, families, and also businesses with another round of stimulus measures that would help to mitigate the tremendous shock that's been felt, the economic shock that's been felt throughout this economy. But I'm glad to hear both of you are leaving us with at least some hope of, an optimistic future, and that we begin to address these problems in a way that's serious and, again, long-lasting.
And also on a note of thanks to you, Laurie, and to the Providence Chamber for the terrific work that you do. We really do depend a lot on the way you organize the business voice here in Rhode Island, and we appreciate very much the effort that goes into that and the successful and thoughtful ideas that come out of the business community here to us through the chamber. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Reid. And on behalf of our entire staff at the chamber and our membership, Merry Christmas. And
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Okay.